Okay, so what are kind of some of the core ideas for learning a buggy whip if we don't know it all too well? We're going to use Mark today as the student. I'm going to coach him into a buggy whip under the guise that he doesn't know what he's doing. Okay, so first off, Mark, your grip going to stay the same. Don't want you guys thinking that buggy whip requires, you know, a significant grip change just because we're aware that we're going to produce more topspin. So the grip stays the same. The first thing that we really want to start to adjust is the drop in the backswing. So without even getting into a loop right now, Mark, can you show me where you would normally drop a standard forehand to? Perfect. So you guys see he's just under waist height. This is common for a standard drive forehand. That does not work for a good buggy whip. So Mark, I'm going to have you set your racket a lot lower than you normally would. Okay, so I love that. I love how the butt cap of the racket is almost facing to the sky. That means the strings are really pointing down. That is a really essential piece of this swing because it really is the steepest of any ground stroke we're going to hit. It really moves vertically. It cannot do that if the racket doesn't start in a really significant drop. Okay, so from that position, Mark, because it's so low and we're working so steeply up, I'm actually going to hold my racket in front of you here, and I want you to swing up the back of my racket without touching my racket. Perfect. Okay. That is a really, really kind of good looking start to a buggy whip for somebody that hasn't done it before. The racket starts very low. If there was a wall or something in his way, he wouldn't touch it because he's working vertically up through the ball. So now I'm going to just drop a couple in play for Mark here. And be aware, when we're going through technique like this, he shouldn't be thinking that he needs to be making these right away. Let's just focus on how the swing feels from a steeper drop position, moving more up the back of the tennis ball. So don't worry if you miss these, but let's drop the racket there. And I'm going to just toss this in and you work straight up the back of the ball. Perfect. Again. Yep. And one more. And so what do we hear there? Really stringy sound, right? It's not that popping sound that we're going to hear when we drive into a ball. It's a much stringier sound. There's a lot more friction going on. Okay, so that's kind of the idea first. Secondly, we do need to obviously incorporate our standard ready position and setting a loop and still be able to get that racket head down. I think what happens to a lot of players out there that aren't familiar with this shot is once their standard loop is incorporated, they're not really aware of how low the racket drops. We would be if we just set it straight down immediately. Once the loop's in play, we kind of lose sight of it or lose the feeling of it. So Mark, what I want you to do is just go through a shadow motion, little bit of a split step, set your loop, and then get that racket head to drop really significantly down and then freeze. Perfect. Okay, so now the position he's in is the one I started him in that last little segment. He's now added, you know, his actual forehand motion. That's really necessary. So let's do that one more time. Split, set the loop, good solid drop and working his way back up the ball. Again, we're at the base, you know, kind of idea right now, so he's not focused on getting this shot in, but we are going to go through that. I'll toss the ball in play, get out of your way a little bit here, split, drop the loop, perfect, Mark. Again, split, loop it up, nice and low. Let's really relax that arm down, Mark, relax it. Yes, perfect. Okay, relaxing that arm is key. Think about it. Come up here real quick. I want you to flex that arm. Really tough to get this arm to drop if he's stiff in here. Now really relax. That thing's going to really have an easy time getting down underneath the tennis ball. That's what we got to be thinking. The ball sits up. We got to be significantly below it. It requires being loose to do that. Okay, so now we want to get into a similar feeling to what we're going to get when we're actually trying to really strike the ball nice. So we haven't seen any racket speed yet. So split, set your loop, focus on that good low drop and see if you can start to add a little more speed coming up the back of the tennis ball now. Awesome. Really good. Keep that arm relaxed. Perfect. One more time. Starting to feel like a buggy whip a little bit, right? Okay, so you guys can see the drop is in play, coming off a good loop, arms loose, creating good speed now going up the ball. We hear that very stringy sound. Can't tell you how important that is when you're learning a buggy whip or trying to improve it. If you're hearing that thump sound when you hit the ball, it's letting you know you're coming too much into the back of the tennis ball. So my advice to you there is drop lower. Keep dropping until you hear that stringy friction sound where the ball's really scraping off the strings. All right, so final product. I think the thing we're really missing is the legs now. Getting a full weight transfer into the ball. Again, big picture, this shot is meant to be a heavy topspin ball, a ton of racket speed, but still using our athleticism, not just focusing on the arm by itself, but still getting everything involved, loading up, coiling, pivoting back through. It's just we're changing the path that the racket travels up the tennis ball on. All right, so Mark, here we go. Let's take a look at the finished product here. Awesome. Really vertical here. Under, up. Excellent. Two more. Full loop. Big drop. Really get that arm under here. Racket down. Great stuff. All right, so, we're playing modern tennis. As we learn new ideas, we don't need to incorporate the athleticism when we're getting that feeling of changing the path of the racket, changing the position that the arms are in at the start and in at the finish. But obviously, as we get going forward and we get a feel for that, we want the finished product to still be this modern brand of tennis where we're really involving the rest of the body. So awesome job right there. The racket path is much steeper. Start to feel that racket head sit low. Start to incorporate the loop. Make sure you are feeling coming off the loop how low that racket gets. Start to make that addition of racket speed and then get the athleticism coming in with the legs and the weight transfer. Pretty quickly we took a guy who didn't know what he was doing and had him hitting like a champ there. All right, so are there changes in how I tilt my body to help with the buggy whip swing? To me, there's definitely something there. What I want to do first is show a couple standard forehand swings. Try to pay attention to the line between my right and my left shoulder as I go ahead and set the racket and swing at the ball. Let's go one more here. Okay. So you guys got a better view than I did, but I'm really trying to feel what the shoulders are doing. To me, that feels really pretty level. I mean, I think right as I go into the ball, this right shoulder maybe dips a little and then levels back out. But you're not seeing a lot of drop or a lot of elevation change in my shoulders when I'm hitting a standard forehand. And the reason for that is because the racket, it doesn't have to get much lower than my waist. I don't need the help of dipping the shoulder to get it down. So definitely agree that, when we're talking about setting the racket really low for a buggy whip, I should start to dip this right shoulder down a little bit, maybe pretty significantly. That's a pretty steep angle of attack there. To me, though, it's maybe not so much to help the racket get down. Again, I feel like if my arm is loose, the racket can drop. So I don't want the feeling that, wow, I got to dip that shoulder just to help it get down. The feeling I have is the reason this dips so much is because I think of how elevated I am coming back up to the ball. It's really a product of me with forward thinking going, well, I got to really work up the tennis ball here. Let me drop down and get everything I can out of the drop. So let's take a look at a few buggy whips here. Pay attention pretty closely to the right shoulder, and let's see how kind of severely I drop this down. Yeah. All right, yeah. You know, it's good. It's a good idea to really be aware, you know, not just of the result of our shot, but what's going on with our body. I can't say that I've thought all that much about how much my right shoulder drops, but that's definitely something where I feel really significantly different at that set position in my shoulders, simply because of how much I'm going to work back up the tennis ball. So is it a helping idea? You know, maybe however we want to package it, but let's definitely go out next time you're practicing buggy whip swings. Even some shadow swings I think could be a great idea. Shadow swings are a really easy way to get your body to kind of memorize these new adjustments. Go ahead and just let that right shoulder drop, and as you're throwing the swing back up, you know, compare it to your standard forehand. And anytime we're super aware of our body, I think it makes these, you know, different types of shots on the forehand side that much easier to interchange when we're playing points and not dealing with a lot of time in between shots. Like, what are some different follow-throughs for a buggy whip? I think that's definitely a conversation to be had, simply because, you know, the ball that's coming in is always changing. And for me, my follow-through will change even when I'm talking about a buggy whip because of how the ball is delivered to me. My point of contact makes a huge difference, you know, based on how I finish. Even though these are all kind of under the buggy whip idea, some balls might be low. I think what we're going to do right now is I'm going to have Mark kind of run through a bunch of different feeds, and I'm going to hold my follow-through, and you guys can see I probably have 3 or 4 different follow-throughs, one of which might be this rodeo finish or cowboy finish. But again, the main idea with the follow-through is let the racket come to rest naturally. We should never be thinking, oh, I think the cowboy finish is cool, you know, let me use it every time I swing a buggy whip. It's just not that simple. We want the racket taking a comfortable path up the tennis ball, and then the racket should be stopping where I'm not having to force it to stop. I'm not having to think about where it stops. I'm letting it come to rest naturally. Okay, so Mark, go ahead. I don't care where you feed these. I am going to buggy whip all these and then just hold my finish after each one. Okay, all right, so pretty standard feed. To me, that feels like my most normal or most commonly used buggy whip finish. I think if I was aware of this every single time I hit it, majority of the time, this racket would be just kind of behind my right shoulder here. Okay, and that was a pretty standard ball coming in. All right, there's a great example. So Mark fed it low, almost had a little skid to it. So maybe it was a volley, maybe it was just kind of a low drive. When I reach down lower, I end up pulling up vertically, but I kind of saw that finish off a little bit. There would be no reason for me from down here to come up and then pull the racket back behind my shoulder the way I did on that first ball. All right, so there's a difference right there. A ball sitting higher, I came behind my shoulder. A ball sitting lower, I held it in front of my shoulder. Both of them are buggy whips, okay? Oh, and there's that rodeo or cowboy finish. I don't even know how good that looked. Now that I did that, I don't think I used that all that often. That took a ton of racket speed from me, almost to the point where the swing didn't feel that loose. I think that's probably why Nadal uses that a lot. He's got so much racket speed that I don't think he can just stop here. I think it's carrying so much speed, it just has to keep going and takes a little longer to come to a stop. So that might be a good takeaway for a lot of you out there. If you don't feel like you have a major amount of racket speed, I don't know that that cowboy or kind of rodeo finish is going to be all that necessary for you, or be something that you even find yourself doing, because it's just, you know, pretty exaggerated move. Let's go one more here, Mark. Yeah, another one. Push me back a little bit, but there's, again, a ball that's sitting a little higher, falling away, and I've got kind of that more traditional buggy whip finish for myself. All right, so yes, different follow-throughs based on how the ball comes in. I think you'd all agree my points of contact on all four of those swings are slightly different. That's going to force me to modify the finish a little. In terms of that Nadal finish, unless you are just wailing away on the tennis ball and can swing maybe significantly faster than even I do, I don't know that that's a finish you'll find yourself using. But again, if it's comfortable for you, whatever the follow-through is, if it's comfortable for you, that's what I want you using. That racket should come to rest naturally. All right, so based on where I am in the court, do I use buggy whip? You know, I think there's probably 4 really good examples of times I use buggy whip. The first one's going to be really when I get driven deep. Okay, if Mark feeds me a heavy topspin ball that has depth on it and I get driven back, I think overwhelmingly what I'm always trying to do is still swing somewhat offensively, even when my opponent is trying to dictate play. So the really great thing about a buggy whip, and we'll see it in all these scenarios, is that it requires so much racket speed. So I'm never getting pushed back in this first example and thinking, oh, well, I got to hit slow and I got to block his ball back. Buggy whip, you know, by nature is a really fast swing, probably the fastest swing we have on the forehand side. So even though I've kind of got a tougher ball to deal with, my mindset is still offensive, which I love. I think you guys will love it too. All right, so Mark, I'm kind of standard position here, good heavy ball to the corner. I get driven back. Here we go, one more. Ooh, good feed. Yeah, so that second feed was awesome. I think it was, you know, this close to the baseline, heavy topspin, some height on it. Yes, I'm getting pushed away, so in my head I'm not going to hit a winner back there. But that buggy whip, the fast swing, all of it, resulting in good topspin, some good depth, I'm at least not losing ground against my opponent there, which is awesome. We can have this kind of deep, heavy battle with Buggy-Whip forehands, and sooner or later, hopefully he hits short and I'm able to step up. But deep against a heavy ball, that is a great time to use a buggy whip. Next example would be when I'm stretched out wide. Couple reasons this is a great shot. Okay, coming from the middle, maybe I'm even in the ad side of the court, having to run a pretty far distance to get to the ball. One thing I love about the buggy whip is it really kind of occurs, besides from getting below the ball significantly, contact generally is working around the tennis ball slightly. So for all you right-handers, it really promotes kind of getting up the right side of the ball. So way out here on the right side of the court, it's going to work the ball back to the left, and guess what's out to the left? There's all the tennis court. Nothing really in front of me, everything back to the left. So buggy whip number 1 on contact, when you're stretched out to the right, is going to really help deliver the ball back to the left. Again, a situation when I'm running, maybe I'm not going to get a full weight transfer, maybe none at all, I'm still on the stretch. Racket speed, that's going to make up for the fact that I don't have all my body weight into the shot. That buggy whip racket speed is going to help me out when I'm kind of still drifting out here to the right. And then again, it's margin for error. I want to feel like I can run the ball down and not be in a situation where I see you know, a lot of missing happens. So the buggy whip promotes height over the net, and then all the topspin drops it off. So it's just a really good way to swing at the ball on the stretch out wide to give yourself a feeling like you're aggressive without being risky, okay? So I'll start a little slightly left of center, and I'll run a couple down here, Mark, buggy whip in the corner. Yeah. Okay, here we go, one more. Yeah, and the second one I actually caught even a little bit later than the first. Still ended up in the middle of the court. It might have even been a slight miss hit in there. Racket speed, I don't think my opponent is stepping up and hitting a winner on that next ball. So you could see my body weight going sideways. That's kind of a no-no if we can help it, but I'm stuck in this situation. Buggy whip's a great shot for wide running forehands. Okay, the third example I have is angle. And let me kind of start this off by saying you don't have to hit a buggy whip to hit a good angle. All right, I'll actually show you one right here, Mark. I'm going to hit a little more of kind of a windshield wiper finish. Just a little cross court angle here. Okay. I thought that was a great shot. Didn't hit a buggy whip finish. But for a lot of you out there, let's just say you're not swinging with the feeling that you're going to get a ton of topspin when you're hitting more of that traditional or kind of wiper finish. If the topspin's not there, angle gets a little bit scary, because if it's not dipping down, you have to play it a little bit lower, and now wide becomes an issue. So I love buggy whip for the angle for any player out there that needs to really ensure topspin, because it's the spinniest ball that we see on the forehand side. We talk about that friction idea, that stringy sound at contact. That's an absolute must for a good cross-court topspin angle. So if some of you have a great angle without going buggy whip, stick with that, but I think you'll see when I run up here, I'm going to get a great result on my angle out of buggy whip simply because of how much topspin I'm going to get. Okay, so I might use that sometimes, I might not. I trust my topspin whichever way I follow through. But like I said, that is probably the best way to guarantee great topspin for this angle that you want to see dipping and then jumping off the court. Okay, so last scenario. How often are you on the baseline, your opponent hits possibly even a shaky little low drive, maybe they sliced it, you come running up here, you switch the grip, and you chip the ball over. Let's see how that looks. Okay. You know, maybe good in the 1970s and 80s. Nowadays, we'd like to be doing something more than that as we come forward. Going forward is an offensive move. 98% of the time we play tennis, buggy whip is a great way to handle that ball and play offensively. Racket speed, can't get over this. Racket speed on the buggy whip. I'll be swinging fast on that shot, where the chip is a slow swing. Ball speed is key to damage the opponent. If I chip it, even if I chip it to a corner, the slow ball speed is going to allow opponent to run the ball down. So by going buggy whip and having a lot of racket speed, that translates to ball speed, and they're going to be under the gun trying to get to this shot. What's the other idea? I got to get the shot up over the net. So while the chip has open strings and ensures I'll get the ball clearing the net pretty much every time, buggy whip with the string shut, because it's going to work so steeply up the ball, is also going to get me to clear the net. So I get more racket speed, I get more translated ball speed, and I still get the assurance that the ball's going to clear the net because of how quickly I'm swinging up the back of the tennis ball. So I want you to start to try using buggy whip on some of these low, shaky shots from your opponents as they're pulling you forward. Yeah, love that. And again, a little modified finish. That because it's low and out in front, I'm never going to be pulling that behind me, not to mention my momentum's still going forward. So I actually love the feeling that I just kind of hold on to that follow through. Kind of the second I pull it up, I can just stay right there, maybe follow it in, maybe get a volley, maybe I hit that for a winner. Let's take a look. One more here, Mark. All right, so, and there would be kind of that follow-up volley in case I don't hit that buggy whip for a winner, but really don't want to be going to net off something weak because I feel like I'll get past easier. So that buggy whip on the short ball is a great way to start to play against some of these just pushy little low shots that we know a lot of players hit and come in and start to make them pay for them because we can swing fast and dictate a little more. All right, so obviously we kind of saw that buggy whip in all sections of the court here. So you might be saying, well, I guess I'm using buggy whip all day. Absolutely not. We don't need it each and every time. Plenty of times we still want to drive that forehand, and therefore the racket wouldn't drop as low. The swing wouldn't come up as high. But these are great times, I think, to illustrate when we're maybe a little bit in trouble or the ball's just a little uncomfortable, for us to stay confident, swing fast, trust our topspin, and not let the opponent dictate to us, you know, kind of how we have to hit in some of these spots of bother.